Another very good tool to help with complicated people, we've all seen these complicated people that get into a meeting room, and they're often either too smart for the group, or they're in an area of knowledge that the group doesn't have much familiarity with, and they may share some idea about the staggered quadrature phase shift keyed signal processing capability of, or something that people can't relate to. And it's important that before you let somebody move on from saying something very complicated that hasn't been understood or acknowledged by anyone, that you try and relate back to them what you think you heard from them. Whether it's right or wrong, it will force them then to stop and say, does that make any sense, what I just said? And re-communicate it to the group in a more effective way. So it's a way of stopping the individual, making them recognize that they have not been understood by you mirroring what they said, attempting to mirror what they said, and then let them re-communicate it to you. So it can either be a complete repeating of their information back to them so they can hear it from someone else, or your interpretation of what they said, in which case they're going to correct you if you're wrong and try and communicate it more effectively. Managing personalities. So we've all encountered the different dynamics in these meeting rooms, and we all know people probably in our own worlds who have these characteristics, and it's important to understand what those people's motives are when they come to the table and express those characteristics. And so we've all encountered the whiner in the meeting. Why can't my project be done? It's so important, and this whole process is wrong, and I don't think this is going to be an effective way to move forward. So a person like that can often inhibit a creative environment, especially if a group's in a process of brainstorming and trying to get ideas out. So it's important that you do not just ignore a whiner, because whiners will tend to whine more when ignored, and more vocally. And the more you ignore them, the more problems you can have. I remember in maybe 10 or 12 years ago, when I was just getting into the area of meeting facilitation, I actually attended a meeting in the Air Force where we had two Air Force officers sitting across from one another, and one of the officers had complained in the beginning of the meeting process, 3-day meeting process, had expressed some concerns, and being a young, inexperienced facilitator, I didn't know how to address that, so I wanted to ignore him and let him continue to express these and hope that he went away. And all that did was stoke the fire. So by the end of the 3rd day, he has complained completely through the process the whole way. The whole group is aligned on the decision process we'd made except the one guy. And at the end, when everyone's happy about it, except him, he had to vocally attack the whole process once again. And having ignored him the whole time, one of the other officers got so upset he climbed across the table and hit the guy. And that is exactly what can happen if you don't validate people. So the right way to deal with a situation where you have a whiner is to acknowledge and repeat their concern. I hear you have a concern. Let's get it up. Here's your concern. Let's document it. Ask them for their recommended solution. You've stressed the concern, and it's good to stress concerns, but we also need solutions, and we're going to let you start with the suggestion, and we're going to associate it with your name. And then add the concern to the parking lot if it's not relevant, and assign their name to it and make them responsible for resolving it, or responsible for bringing the task force together who resolves it. So put the responsibility back on the whiner to address the concerns that they have and give them control. Often whiners are whining because they feel disempowered. So it's important that as you're going through the meeting process, and if you're working with a meeting leader in the beginning of the process, that you share with the meeting leader that if these issues come up, you may assign these issues back to who's ever bringing them up. The 800-pound gorilla. We've all seen the 800-pound gorilla in the meeting process, the type A personality, the person who cannot stop talking. They have an idea and an opinion on everything. With the 800-pound gorilla, this is a different type of personality. Often it's a type A personality, a person who likes to be recognized as a power player in any collaborative context. And the way that they believe that it is easiest to express power is through a very vocal expression of their opinion on too many topics to let other people have the ability to voice their opinions. The way to deal with an 800-pound gorilla is to first acknowledge their comment. Oh, Sally has a good comment, very good comment. Thank you very much. Let's record and be aware that Sally's come up with that comment. If she continues, you want to say, I believe Sally might have a comment, but before we hear from Sally, we've heard from her on a couple topics. I'd like to hear from some other folks, and redirect the conversation. So ensure that there's an opportunity for others to speak. You will probably need to come back to Sally and validate her, though, because she wants to make sure that her opinion is heard. And then if it gets to the point where you just cannot get Sally to back off and give other folks the opportunity to share, you may want to acknowledge, we know Sally is one of the types who likes to express herself a lot. Make her aware that she's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that we're all aware of that fact, and now we want to hear from other opinions. So it's a way of getting the person to, again, acknowledge their behavior, make them aware of what they're doing, make the group aware, and giving the collaborative process an opportunity to reorient the conversation back to more balance in the meeting room. So the 800-pound gorilla is a difficult type of personality to address, and the way to go about it is to make sure that, again, you don't ignore them, you acknowledge them, and put their conversation in context. So in summary, using the right tools at the right time in the facilitation process dramatically improves the collaborative effectiveness of teams. You have to be very careful when you're using the facilitated process not to intervene too much. Don't get too interested in what you have to say. If you find yourself talking too much, then you're probably not doing a good job in facilitation. So you want to intervene, but only intervene at the right time. At the same time, there's a delicate balance, because you do not want to be so afraid to intervene in the conversation that the collaborative process gets derailed and you haven't kept it on track. So you need to push the group, keep them on track, align to the agenda. At the same time, don't fall in love with your own voice as you go through this. Intervene only when necessary. It's important to constantly monitor the group and carefully select how and when you intervene, as I just talked about. And good outcomes come from helping the group set good expectations and constantly reminding them of how they are doing against those expectations. Nothing can frustrate a group more than to have an expectation set, have the group not in any way meet that expectation, and have no acknowledgement of the fact that they weren't meeting the expectation as they spent their time. They don't want to walk out feeling like they wasted their time. So it's important that you set the expectation with them, you track how they're doing against the expectation, and you tell them how they delivered in the end against the expectation, and then you prepare the next set of expectations for the next collaborative session. So in summary, if you're going to use a structured decision-making process such as Decision Lens, you can be dramatically more effective at implementing it in a collaborative environment if you bring tools to the table that help to foster collaboration and open sharing among a group of stakeholders or decision makers. Thank you very much.